Rules are rules after all. You want to play lumberjack, learn to handle your end of the log. But Donald Trump has lit yet another fire among Republican voters, and this one talks about cheating, which brings up a simple question. Is it really cheating? Or is it just Trump seeking to deflect from his campaign, making more than a few boneheaded decisions in trying to play the win 4 years in the White House competition? Our guest can explain it all best. Former Deputy Chairman of the Republican National Committee, former Assistant to President Ronald Reagan for Political and Intergovernmental Affairs. Welcome, Frank Donatelli, back to the Hardline. Frank, thanks a lot for joining us. Let's go ahead and get right to this, because Donald Trump's out there screaming that it's nothing but cheats and liars and frauds, and you guys changed the rules. But then we got people over here saying, Mr. Trump, these have been the rules for a long time. You just did a bad job with your people learning about how to play the political game. Which one's true?
Well, look, I'm not here to advocate for any particular candidate, but it does get a little tiring every time Mr. Trump loses in a state and then almost always has to blame the rules or the governor or somebody. I mean, whatever happened about saying, you know what, I'm going to do better next time. The Republican rules, Ed, require that any state party that's going to fundamentally change how they select their national convention delegates so inform the RNC and all of the candidates who are running at that time by October 1 of the previous year. So on October 1, 2015, all of the candidates had notice that Colorado was moving to this system. Colorado had a primary. They decided to change to a convention where they would select convention delegates by statewide vote and then congressional district delegates by caucuses at the state convention. And everybody had notice of that. So it's sort of hard to know what the complaint is here. Ted Cruz just did a better job. He had a better slate of candidates, delegate candidates, and most importantly, he went to the convention and he addressed the delegates, and I think that meant a lot. I
want to stop there really briefly and make that point again. People I know watching us right now, there's a lot of them who don't like Senator Cruz. They love Donald Trump. But let's take the personalities out of this. The Cruz campaign played the game. And if you're going to be involved in the game, you better know how to do it, right?
I think the one thing that everybody, if I had been asked for one bit of advice from all the candidates, it would be to say, you know what, we do not pick our nominees by national primary. We have a series of state parties, all of whom are sovereign, and they all set their own rules to select the delegates who will go to the national convention, and then it's the national convention delegates that select our party's nominee. That has always been the case. As we've said, the way the delegates have been selected in recent years have changed. Most states now have gone to statewide primaries to select their delegates and bind the delegates based on those results. Colorado, being a sovereign state, has chosen to go in the other direction. And so everybody is on constructive notice that if you want to get a majority of the delegates, you need to pay attention to the delegate rules in each state.
Here's something. Peter Morisi, the economist, he's going to join us later on the show. Last week, he spoke about Donald Trump's campaign plan and what makes it seem as though he's going to have the tough time going to the general election after the primaries. I want you to hear this. Here's what he got.
This organization issue, do you realize that Hillary Clinton's organization in Iowa is still in place? They're ready to rev up and go into the general election. Trump disassembled his Iowa organization. If he were to get nominated, he has to start from scratch in August. Good night. Forget it.
Isn't that the point? I got about 60 seconds here left, Frank. But if you're going to become president of the United States, you go through the primary process, but you've still got to have that ground game even after the state is done, because the general election comes around. You've got to be ready for that from that very first day, or else you're going to fall behind.
And in an era where our turnout numbers are much higher, the percentage of people who turn out to vote in presidential elections is much higher. Woe to the candidate that believes they can just make that up by media and paid television. We're at a time where if people are going to turn out to vote, they want to hear directly from the candidate. They want to hear from his or her organization. They want to hear from their friends who are supporting that candidate. It's a building process. So I would say, I hope our nominee, whoever he is, are thinking right now about putting a strong ground game in place so Republicans can turn out as many voters who are right of center as we can possibly find.
Like I pointed out much earlier, if you're going to play the game, learn your end of the log. Unfortunately, it's the way it's been for over 150 years. Frank Donatelli, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk about some sneaky tricks. Back to the days of James Bond, where sex and espionage go hand in hand, and China scores big against America. That's coming up next, right here on The Hardline.